Growing up in the Mitchell household meant understanding your place in the family hierarchy from day one. My brother Jake was the golden child, the star athlete who could throw a perfect spiral at age 10, the math whiz who solved calculus problems for fun, the son who made Dad's chest puff with pride at every parent-teacher conference. Then there was me, Sarah, the dreamy kid who spent hours scribbling stories in notebooks, who preferred Shakespeare to spreadsheets, who saw the world through the lens of words rather than numbers. Dad never tried to hide his disappointment in my choices. "Writing doesn't pay the bills, Sarah," became his mantra, repeated so often it might as well have been our family motto. When I won the statewide essay competition in high school, he shrugged and said, "That's nice, honey, but it won't help you buy a house someday." When I got accepted to university with a partial scholarship for my academic achievements, his first question wasn't congratulations. It was, "How much is this going to cost me?" The tension escalated when I announced my intention to pursue a master's degree in communications and media studies. Dad's reaction was immediate and brutal. "Another degree? Sarah, you're already drowning in student loans from your bachelor's. Do you have any idea how much money I've already invested in your education? And for what? So you can write pretty sentences?" Mom tried to mediate, as she always did. "David, she's passionate about her field. The communications industry is growing with unpaid internships and freelance gigs that barely cover rent," Dad interrupted, his voice rising. Meanwhile, Jake's engineering degree is going to land him a 6-figure salary right out of college. That's the difference between smart choices and expensive hobbies. The comparison to Jake was constant and crushing. Every family dinner became a battlefield where Dad would highlight Jake's achievements, his internship at a prestigious firm, his high GPA, his practical girlfriend who was also studying engineering. "Now that's a power couple," Dad would say, beaming with approval. "Two engineers who understand how the real world works." I pushed through my master's program despite the constant criticism at home. I maintained a 3.9 GPA, published 3 articles in academic journals, and completed an internship at a local marketing firm where my supervisor praised my innovative campaign strategies. But Dad wasn't there for my graduation ceremony. "I've got a work conference," he explained over the phone. "Besides, you know how I feel about all this academic stuff. Call me when you get a real job." The months following graduation were brutal. I applied to dozens of positions: communications manager roles, content strategist positions, public relations coordinator jobs. Each rejection email felt like another confirmation of Dad's predictions. I watched my savings dwindle while working temporary administrative jobs that barely covered my expenses. The worst part wasn't the financial struggle. It was the way Dad looked at me during family gatherings, that expression of vindicated disappointment that said, "I told you so," without him having to speak the words. Then Jake announced his engagement to Emma, his college sweetheart. The engagement party was a celebration of everything Dad valued: practical careers, sensible choices, and a future built on solid financial foundations. Jake had landed his dream job at a major engineering firm. Emma was completing her chemical engineering degree, and they'd already started talking about buying a house together. "Finally, someone in this family who knows how to make adult decisions," Dad said to me privately during the engagement party, gesturing toward the happy couple. "Look at them, Sarah. They're building something real, something sustainable. That's what success looks like." I forced a smile and changed the subject, but his words echoed in my head for weeks. As the wedding planning began, I felt increasingly like an outsider in my own family. Every conversation seemed to revolve around Jake and Emma's bright future, their career prospects, their 5-year plan. Meanwhile, I was still sending out resumes and receiving generic rejection letters. The night before the wedding, as I helped Mom arrange flowers in the church, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Your time will come, sweetheart. I believe in you, even if your father struggles to show it." But as I looked around at the beautiful decorations, at the evidence of Jake and Emma's perfect life unfolding, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Dad was right. Maybe I really had wasted years and thousands of dollars chasing an impossible dream. Maybe some people were destined to be the cautionary tale rather than the success story. Little did I know that in less than 24 hours, Dad would make his feelings about my life choices devastatingly public, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change our relationship forever. The wedding day dawned perfect and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the church windows as Jake and Emma exchanged vows. I stood in my role as maid of honor, wearing a dusty rose bridesmaid dress that Emma had chosen, trying to focus on the beauty of the moment rather than the knot of anxiety that had been growing in my stomach all morning. Dad sat in the front pew, beaming with pride as he watched his son commit to a future that represented everything he valued: stability, practicality, and financial security. The ceremony was flawless. Jake's voice was steady as he recited his vows. Emma glowed with happiness, and even I felt myself tearing up at the genuine love evident between them. For a moment, I forgot about my own struggles and felt nothing but joy for my brother and his new wife. The reception was held at the Riverside Country Club, an elegant venue overlooking the lake where Jake and Emma had had their first date. Round tables draped in white linen filled the ballroom, each centerpiece a masterpiece of white roses and baby's breath. I sat at the family table, positioned between my elderly Aunt Margaret and my cousin Lisa, both of whom had been asking me uncomfortable questions about my job search all evening. "So, Sarah, dear, have you found anything in your field yet?" Aunt Margaret asked, her voice carrying that particular tone older relatives use when they're fishing for gossip. "Your mother mentioned you've been looking for quite some time now." I forced a smile and gave my rehearsed response about the competitive job market and how I was being selective about opportunities. But I could feel Dad's eyes on me from across the table, that familiar expression of barely concealed disappointment etched on his face. The dinner was delicious. Filet mignon and salmon, perfectly prepared by the country club's chef, but I could barely taste it. I kept watching Dad, noting how he lit up when talking to Jake's engineering colleagues, how he proudly introduced Emma as my brilliant daughter-in-law, the chemical engineer. When people asked about me, his responses were notably brief. "Sarah's still figuring things out," or "she's exploring her options." As the evening progressed, I found myself drinking more wine than usual, trying to numb the familiar ache of feeling like the family disappointment. I watched Jake and Emma's first dance, saw the way Dad's eyes misted with pride, and felt increasingly invisible despite being surrounded by family and friends. Then came the speeches. The best man, Jake's college roommate Mike, delivered a heartfelt tribute to their friendship, complete with embarrassing stories from their fraternity days that had everyone laughing. Emma's father spoke eloquently about welcoming Jake into their family, praising his character and his bright future. The maid of honor speech fell to me, and I managed to get through it without breaking down, focusing on childhood memories and my hopes for the couple's happiness. But then Dad stood up, champagne flute in hand, and I felt my blood turn to ice. I knew that look, that particular set to his jaw that appeared whenever he was about to make a point he'd been holding back. The room quieted as he cleared his throat, commanding attention the way he always did. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a moment to talk about my son Jake," Dad began, his voice carrying clearly across the reception hall. From the time he was little, Jake understood the value of hard work and smart decisions. He excelled in school, chose a practical major, and graduated with a degree that opened doors to real opportunities. I felt my stomach clench as Dad's gaze swept across the room, his voice growing more animated with each word. Jake didn't chase pipe dreams or waste time on degrees that lead nowhere. He looked at the world realistically and made choices that would set him up for success. And look at the result: a beautiful wife who shares his practical approach to life, a great job with excellent benefits, and a future built on solid ground. The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on Dad's words. I could feel my face growing hot as I sensed where this was heading. "Emma, welcome to our family. You and Jake are perfect examples of what happens when young people make mature, responsible decisions about their careers and their lives." Dad raised his glass higher, and I saw him look directly at me, his eyes cold and determined. Unlike some people in this family, Jake understands that success comes from practical choices, not expensive fantasies. He didn't waste years pursuing degrees that employers don't value, or chasing careers that don't exist in the real world. My cousin Lisa gasped audibly. Aunt Margaret's fork clattered against her plate. The entire family table was staring at me now, their expressions ranging from shock to pity to second-hand embarrassment. But Dad wasn't finished. His voice grew louder, more deliberate, as if he wanted to ensure every person in that ballroom heard what he was about to say. "So here's to my son Jake, proof that at least one of my children wasn't a complete waste of money. Here's to choosing reality over fantasy, practical skills over pretty words, and building something real instead of chasing impossible dreams." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like every eye in the room was on me, burning with curiosity and pity. Jake's face had gone pale, his mouth hanging open in shock. Emma looked like she wanted to disappear under the table. My mother's champagne glass trembled in her hand, tears already forming in her eyes. Dad drained his champagne and sat down, apparently satisfied with his public declaration. The room slowly began to buzz with whispered conversations as people processed what they'd just witnessed. I sat frozen, feeling like I'd been stripped naked in front of 150 wedding guests, publicly branded as the family failure. I somehow managed to excuse myself, mumbling something about needing air, and practically ran toward the ladies' room. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely push open the bathroom door. Once inside, I locked myself in a stall and finally let the tears fall. Tears of humiliation, rage, and something deeper. The devastating realization that my own father had just declared me worthless in front of everyone who mattered to me. 26 years old, with 2 degrees and a head full of dreams, and I'd just been publicly dismissed as a waste of money at my brother's wedding. The worst part wasn't even the public humiliation. It was the small voice in my head that whispered, maybe, just maybe, he was right. The 2 weeks following Jake's wedding were the darkest of my adult life. I barely left my cramped studio apartment, surviving on delivery pizza and the dwindling remains of my savings account. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from family members and friends who'd witnessed Dad's devastating toast, but I couldn't bring myself to answer most of them. What was there to say? That my father had publicly declared me a failure? That maybe he was right? My brother Jake called every day, his voice thick with guilt and apology. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was going to say that. Emma and I were mortified. That wasn't okay what he did to you." But even Jake's support felt hollow. He was calling from his new house, the one he'd bought with his engineering salary, probably sitting next to his brilliant wife who shared his practical worldview. He meant well, but he couldn't understand what it felt like to be the family disappointment. The cautionary tale parents tell their children about making poor life choices. Mom tried to visit several times, but I pretended not to be home. I could hear her talking to Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor, asking if she'd seen me lately. "She's been very quiet," Mrs. Chen reported in her broken English. "Very sad, I think. The unemployment benefits barely covered my rent, and my temp agency had dried up as a source of work. I spent hours staring at job search websites, my confidence so shattered that even entry-level positions seemed beyond my reach. Every rejection email felt like another confirmation of Dad's words. Maybe I really was a waste of money. Maybe I should have listened to him years ago and chosen something practical, something safe. On Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks and 3 days after the wedding, I was lying on my couch in yesterday's pajamas, mindlessly scrolling through Netflix when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number with a New York area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'd been getting a lot of robocalls lately, and I wasn't in the mood to deal with someone trying to sell me extended car warranty. But something made me answer on the 4th ring. "Hello?" My voice came out hoarse from disuse. "Good afternoon. Is this Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was professional, confident, with a slight New York accent. "Yes, this is Sarah. Wonderful. This is Jennifer Harrison. I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications at Goldman Sachs. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." My heart stopped. Goldman Sachs. I'd applied for their communications director position back in March, what felt like a lifetime ago. It was one of those long-shot applications you send out, knowing you probably don't have enough experience, but hoping someone might take a chance on you. I'd completely forgotten about it in the chaos of job searching and wedding drama. No, this is fine," I managed. Sitting up so quickly I got dizzy. "How can I help you?" "Well, I'm calling with some very good news, actually. We've been reviewing applications for our communications director role for several months now. It's quite a competitive position. We had over 800 applicants from around the world." I held my breath, not daring to hope. "Your application materials were exceptional, Sarah. Your academic background, your published work, your innovative approach to digital communication strategy, everything stood out to our selection committee. But what really impressed us was your thesis on crisis communication in the digital age. It's exactly the kind of forward-thinking perspective we need here." Thank you," I whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break whatever spell was making this conversation real. "We'd like to offer you the position, Sarah. The starting salary is $195,000 annually, plus a comprehensive benefits package, stock options, and a $15,000 signing bonus. You'd be leading a team of 12 communications professionals and reporting directly to our chief marketing officer. I actually asked her to repeat the salary, $195,000. I was currently making exactly $0. The number was so far beyond my wildest expectations that I wondered if I was dreaming. That's incredible, I finally managed. When would you need an answer? Well, we're hoping you can start as soon as possible. We know it's a big move. You'd be relocating to Manhattan, and we understand that's not a small decision. We can provide relocation assistance, of course, and help you find suitable housing. What do you think? What did I think? I thought I was having an out-of-body experience. I thought the universe had just handed me the biggest plot twist of my life. I thought about Dad's toast, his dismissive comments about my worthless degree, his public declaration that I was a waste of money. I accept, I said, surprising myself with how quickly the words came out. I absolutely accept. Excellent. I'll have HR send over the formal offer documents today. Welcome to Goldman Sachs, Sarah. I have a feeling you're going to do amazing things here. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence for about 10 minutes, staring at my phone like it might disappear if I looked away. Then I started laughing. Not the bitter, defeated laugh I'd been carrying around for weeks, but genuine, disbelieving, joy-filled laughter that bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest. I called my mother first, because I knew she'd been worried sick about me. Sarah! Oh, honey, I've been so worried. How are you feeling? Mom, I said, still laughing. You're not going to believe this. I just got a job offer from Goldman Sachs in New York for $195,000 a year. The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Mom? Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, she said, her voice shaking. Are you serious right now? Dead serious. I start in 3 weeks. She screamed. Actually screamed with joy, loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Through her tears and excited babbling, I heard her call out to Dad, who was apparently in the kitchen. David, get in here. Sarah got a job at Goldman Sachs. The news spread through our family network with the speed of wildfire. My cousin Lisa called within an hour, having heard from Aunt Margaret, who'd heard from Mom. Jake called, whooping with excitement and pride. Even Emma sent a text. Holy shit, Sarah. Sorry for the language, but OMG. But the call I was waiting for, dreading and anticipating in equal measure, came that evening. Dad's name appeared on my phone screen at 7:30 p.m., right around the time he usually got home from work. Sarah. His voice was different, smaller somehow, uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. Hi, Dad. Your mother told me about your job offer. Goldman Sachs, she said. That's right. A long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, could almost picture him sitting in his favorite chair, trying to process this information. That's quite an achievement, sweetheart. Goldman Sachs is, well, it's one of the most prestigious firms in the world, so I've heard. Another pause. The salary your mother mentioned, is that accurate? $195,000 base salary, plus benefits and stock options, and a signing bonus. I heard him exhale slowly. In the background, I could hear the TV news playing, the same evening news program he'd watched every night for as long as I could remember. Sarah, I may have been too harsh with you. At the wedding, I mean. Your mother says I embarrassed you in front of everyone. The understatement was almost funny. Dad, you called me a waste of money in front of 150 people. At Jake's wedding. I know I did. And I was wrong. I was frustrated, watching you struggle to find work. And I thought maybe some tough love would motivate you to consider other options. Other options like what, Dad? Giving up on everything I'd worked for? Admitting that you were right about my worthless degree? It's not worthless, he said quietly. Clearly it's not worthless if Goldman Sachs is willing to pay you nearly $200,000 a year to use it. I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of a knot I'd been carrying around for weeks, maybe years, but I wasn't ready to let him off the hook yet. Dad, I need you to understand something. Every rejection letter I got, every month I struggled to find work, every time you made a comment about my poor choices, it all became fuel, not motivation in the way you intended, but fuel to prove you wrong. Sarah, I'm not successful despite your doubt. I'm successful because your doubt taught me that the only person's approval I really needed was my own. Do you understand that? The silence stretched between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I should have said that a long time ago. I should have supported your dreams instead of trying to tear them down. I felt tears starting again. but these were different. Tears of release, of forgiveness, of something that felt like closure. I know you love me, Dad. I know you thought you were protecting me from disappointment, but you were so afraid I'd fail that you never considered what might happen if I succeeded. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sarah. We talked for another hour. Really talked. In a way we hadn't in years. He asked about my new job, about New York, about my plans for the future. For the first time in my adult life, I heard genuine interest in his voice when he asked about my career. As I hung up the phone that night, I realized that something fundamental had changed. The little girl who'd spent years desperate for her father's approval was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd learned the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the people who doubt you the loudest are simply afraid you'll prove them wrong. And sometimes, proving them wrong is exactly what you need to do to find out who you really are. 3 weeks later, I walked through the doors of Goldman Sachs in Manhattan, wearing my new navy blue suit and carrying a leather briefcase I'd bought to celebrate. My nameplate read, Sarah Mitchell, Director of Communications. And when I introduced myself to my new team, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete confidence in my own worth. Dad had been wrong about a lot of things, but he'd been right about one. Success does come from making smart choices. He just hadn't understood that sometimes the smartest choice is to believe in yourself when nobody else will.